Welcome to Rouse Rising. I am Katie, and on today's vlog, I'm going to be sharing with you food preservation. We're going to be preserving all sorts of things with our Stay Fresh freeze dryer. I'm going to do a little pressure canning, a little freeze drying. We're also going to do some water bath canning. We're going to be storing our dried goods for long term with our vacuum sealer. If you haven't already, click the subscribe button. I would love to have you a part of the Rouse Rising family, where we prepare nourishing foods made from scratch. You know what I have on my mind today? I'm prepping. I am going to take this 5 dozen white eggs and I am going to freeze dry them, and I'm going to take you along for the process. I can explain to you how to do this, and if you want to check out my Stay Fresh freeze dryer, you definitely need to do that, okay? You need to do that because right now you can get $50 back with my code, with my link. I'll leave everything down below in this video's description for your Stay Fresh freeze dryer. I've been very pleased with mine. I've been able to store and stock so much food, but today we're gonna be freeze drying eggs. So what I'm gonna do first is get out my Vitamix blender, and I'm gonna blend up a whole bunch of eggs. And right now I have my freeze dryer out in the garage cooling. It is starting to freeze right now. So what I'm gonna do is liquefy all of these eggs. They're already liquid, but I'm gonna blend them up and I'm gonna pour them into the trays out in the garage and slide the trays back in gently and let those work on freeze drying. So first I'm gonna blend up all these eggs. I have got my blender going. I'm just gonna put this towel down to clean up any kind of mess. And I'm just gonna start cracking my eggs into that. These are going to be a long-term stored item. It is gonna turn into a powder, and I'm using white eggs. And in an emergency situation, or do we really care if the eggs are, do we really care if they're pastured, organic eggs? No, we don't. We're worried about survival, right? We're worried about not starving. We're worried about feeding our children. I'm saving these eggshells for gardening. I am going to boil them or something. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. What's the process? Somebody comment down below. What's the process for taking care of your eggs? If you want to add them to your soil, to amend your soil for whatever. I think I got to boil them and then dry them in the oven, and then I'm going to blend them up. So we're going to fill this whole Vitamix up with eggs and freeze dry them. Because I'm worried about keeping my family alive. I'm worried about prepping for my family and making sure that we have everything we need to stay alive and to survive, because it is predicted if there is an EMP, it will shut down all of our electronics. It will shut down all of our battery-powered everything. We will not be able to operate anything, right? So we're going to have to go back to starting fires. We're going to have to go back to purifying water to drink. You know, our well runs on electricity, so we won't have access to our electricity. We have a river down the road, assuming nobody shuts off the dam that feeds this river. Things like that are what I am mindful of. I have a couple of different water filtration devices, and we need to be making sure that we are well prepared. We need to make sure that we have plenty of food to feed our children. These eggs are going to help feed my family should there be that situation. I'm also going to work on getting some of our food out of our freezers. All right, so I've just gently blended up my eggs, and now we're going to take these out to the garage. All right, here's my machine. Everything is cooling. These are going to freeze, so I can pour these in here like this, and they are going to freeze in these trays. This freeze dryer will freeze your food. Just have to be careful that we don't fill them too much. There will be some expansion, and then the reason why I'm pouring them in here is because you don't want to transport these trays or try to get them in your freezer to freeze them. It's just better just to go ahead and pour them in here like so. All right, so I'm gonna go and make some more. Close this up so it can keep on freezing. But this is what we're doing, y'all. All right, you all, I've done 9 dozen eggs. That's what I'm trying to fit in here. I might have done too many. We shall see. I'm filling these about 3/4 of the way full, primarily so that they have room to expand to freeze. Alright, I have boiled these eggshells. I boiled them in a huge pot of water, and then I drained them and I put them on this tray and stuck them in the oven at 200 degrees until they are bone dry. So now what I'm going to do is they're going to cool, and I'm going to put them in my Vitamix, and I'm going to grind them up into a powder, and then that way we can feed the eggshells to my garden, to my plants when I have a garden this spring and summer. I can add them when I dig the holes to plant my transplants and things like that, give the ground some extra calcium. I think, leave a comment down below, what do you use eggshells for? I know that I can feed them back to the chickens. I can dust their food, but we don't have any chickens right now. So I had all these eggshells and I figured I better save them and do something else with them, reuse them somehow. So let me know down in the comments, what do you use eggshell powder for? All right, these eggs, we've got 3 hours left, and you can tell everything has shrunk. It's all turning to powder, but it shrinks quite a bit once the moisture content is gone out of there, and you can see all the ice from all the moisture being removed. So we're just gonna let this go for a little bit longer, and hopefully it will be done in the 3 hours that it has left, and then I can powder up all these eggs. All right, it appears that the freeze drying is complete, so I can decrease the pressure and check these trays. So I come over here and I release this valve. Everything's released, and now I can actually check to see if my eggs are done. And I always check the middle trays because sometimes they can be a little bit gooey. Oh wow, so those look like they are really dry. And the trays are actually warm. So this appears to be all dry. All right. So, and I'm gonna check this top one now. Looks like it is completely dry. So I can remove these trays now and package up these freeze-dried eggs. Okay, so I'm gonna close this now, and I'm gonna hook up the hose to it. Sorry, I apologize, it's a little dark. Hook up my hose to my bucket here. I'm gonna open it. I'm gonna put my hose in my bucket. Got my hose going into my bucket. Now I'm going to exit. Stop this freeze drying session, and I'm gonna defrost. Start. That's gonna melt all the ice inside of my chamber, and then once the ice is melted, it's all gonna drain out this pipe back here. So everything else is ready to go. I'm gonna take these inside and deal with them.
A new place, a new home. For a while, let me feel alive. Nothing to hold me back. Take my time, just enjoy the ride. A new man passing by. Life is good, best I've ever felt.
Right now we're gonna vacuum seal these jars of eggs because we want them vacuum sealed. And I'm also going to put oxygen absorbers in them. And we're going to pop one of these in here. Then we're going to put the lids on, make sure that the rim is all good.
To the sky, I found my way, I found my way. I was in the dark against it all, but made it through the day, 'cause I found my way.
Okay, vacuum sealed jar. Go down the line and do that with each one of these.
'Cause I found my way. I found my way. Cause I found my way, my way, my way. Find my way, my way. Cause I found my way, my way, my way. Find my way, my way. I found my way, I found my way. I was in the dark against it all, but made it through the day. Cause I found my way, I found my way. In bad times, I know I'll be okay. Cause I found my way. Cause I found my way. Cause I found my way, my way, my way. Find my way, my way. Cause I found my way, my way, my way. Find my way, my way. I found my way, I found my way. I was in the dark against it all, but made it through the day. Cause I found my way, I found my way. In bad times, I know I'll be okay. Cause I found my way.
I'm gonna write eggs on all of these tops in today's date. Some of these lids I have reused. To rehydrate the powder for 1 egg, you need 2 tablespoons of egg powder, 2 tablespoons of water, and that is going to give you 1 egg. So I'm excited to put these on the shelf, and then we've got some stable, shelf-stable egg powder so that we can have eggs in an emergency, or if we run out of eggs or I need some for a baking recipe or whatever. I've got these beautiful golden eggs that are shelf-stable for years to come. Next, we're going to be freeze-drying cow's colostrum. Okay, and this is the freeze-dried colostrum that I made. It took less than 24 hours to freeze dry these 4 trays that I have. And right now I'm just breaking it up into a finer powder so that I can store it in these glass jars for long term. This is going back to the lady that brings us our raw cow's milk. What happened was a cow recently gave birth and the baby died overnight because the cow birthed overnight and the baby froze to death. So they milked the colostrum from the cow, and that's what we're doing right now, is just freeze drying the colostrum. This is really good to boost immunity. This is good for people that are getting sick, unless you're dairy intolerant, of course, like myself. So this is not something that I can utilize, but I am returning this to the lady that brings us our milk, and she can turn it into capsules or store it for long term or use it however she wants to. Next, I am canning up some beef stew, and as I am editing this video, I realized I forgot to put onions into the beef stew, but I've got my broth boiling back there. That is some canned beef broth that I had on the shelf. I went ahead and cold packed the beef stew meat, half a teaspoon of salt in each one of these jars, and then probably about a potato and a half and 1 whole carrot is in each one of these pint jars. I've got my lids right here sitting in boiling water so that the silicone or the rubber on the inside of the seal on the lid can get nice and warm and malleable to go on top of my jars. Then what I'm going to do is add the boiling broth to these jars with 1-inch headspace, and I'm also going to add or top them off with water if I need to. You can do that. And then we're going to throw them into the pressure canner for 75 minutes. That is how long we do our pint jars in the pressure canner, is for 75 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and get these going in there, and then we're going to have some quick and easy meals on the shelf stable. I'm trying to work through some of the items in my freezer and around the house to make them more shelf stable. So that's what we're working on in this video, is preserving food. After you add your liquid to the jars, you want to make sure there's no air bubbles. You want to make sure that you have the appropriate amount of headspace for whatever you are canning. That's why I am poking it. and adding a little bit more water to these before I put on the lids and the rims. The next step is to take some white vinegar on a clean rag and go around each rim and make sure that you remove all of the debris from the lid, from the rim, so that your lid makes a proper seal. So as you can see, that's what I am doing here. And I am putting on the rings finger tight. That is just twisting them on until there is full resistance without cranking down on them at all. You want to be able to let the steam and everything, the air, release from the jars as they are pressure canning, and that is going to help get a good seal. So now they are all in my pressure canner. I am going to turn on this burner and get this going, and then I will show you the end result. Next up, I had a whole bunch of frozen elderberries in my freezer that I needed to deal with, so I actually did freeze dry a whole bunch of elderberries in this whole food preservation process. I did not share that with you, but I do have that on my channel already. So what we are doing is making some elderberry jelly. I'm adding 7 cups of sugar to this 5 cups of elderberry juice. And how I made the juice was I put the elderberries into a pot on the stove and I added some water and I let them simmer for about 45 minutes to an hour. Then I crushed them all up and strained them through a fine mesh sieve, and that gave me my potent elderberry juice. There's other ways that you can juice elderberries. This is how I have always done it. So I'm just mixing in the sugar and we're going to bring this to a rolling boil. And what that means is that this is going to boil while I'm stirring it, and the boiling will not stop when stirred. So we're going to get this going, and then we're also going to start over on the stove top. You want to follow your Sure Gel or your Pomona's pectin instructions for all of your jelly, jam, or preserve needs. But what I am doing is 1 package of Sure Gel to 3/4 of a cup water on the stove top, and you bring that to a boil for 2 minutes. So that is what I have done here. So then I'm going to add this mixture to my pot of elderberry syrup. Essentially is what it is. It has organic cane syrup and then the elderberry juice, and that is 8 cups of liquid right there in my Instant Pot. So I'm just adding a little bit to temper it in there, and then to actually get most of it out of my pot as possible, I just went ahead and added some elderberry syrup in there just to get it thinned out a little bit to clean out my pot. And we're going to bring this to a rolling boil. Now, I know that I said that a few minutes ago, but you bring it to a rolling boil for 2 minutes after you add your pectin. Now, typically when I make this recipe the same every time, and there's only been one time that I actually got an elderberry jelly to set the first time, and every single time I've made it since, I've had to redo it and add another half a pack of pectin to it. And that's exactly what happened this time. I'm always scared to add an extra half a pack of pectin, but this is the third time that this has not worked for me. So next time I make elderberry jelly, I'm going to go ahead and do the 5 cups of juice with the 7 cups of sugar, and then I'm going to do 1.5 packs of the Sure Gel. Now you see back there I have the sugar-free pack. I didn't actually use that in this recipe. I just had that out because it was an open box in my cabinet, but I used the regular amount of Sure Gel for this recipe. So next I'm going to get my hot jars out of the oven. They have been in the oven at 200 degrees Fahrenheit, so I'm going to get some of them out of the oven. I do them in kind of batches, so I might do 3 or 4 jars at a time. I have my lids in some hot water, again, to soften the seal on those so that we get a nice good seal when they go into my water bath. I also have water starting to boil on the stove in a giant pot. So once you can see now, this is a rolling boil. It is not stopping. It will not stop boiling as I stir it. So we know now after the 2-minute time that this is ready to go into my little 1/2 pint jars. So that's what I'm using today. I'm also going to use a 1 pint or 2 jars for this. And this always makes quite a bit of jelly for us. So I'm really excited about that. But again, I didn't add enough pectin, and this is going to need to either be redone or we will just use it as an elderberry syrup for our pancakes or to make the yogurt drops that I like to make in the freeze dryer. I mix plain yogurt with this elderberry syrup, and then I put drops on my freeze dryer trays, and we freeze dry the yogurt to make little yogurt melts for my kids to have as a snack. So what you see I am doing right here is skimming off all of the foam that was produced in the boiling process. You definitely want to do that when you can up your jams and jellies. I'm using my jar grabber to grab my hot jars out of the 200-degree Fahrenheit oven. These are clean jars, sterile jars, and we are going to fill them up with about a ½ inch from the rim for these little half-pint jars. The next thing you're going to want to do is the same process. You use a little bit of vinegar on a clean cloth, you wipe the rims, you put the lids on, and then you tighten down the jar lid rings finger tight. These are going to go into a water bath on the stove with 2 inches covering the tops of the jar, 2 inches of water covering the tops of the jar, and they're going to water bath from anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. I say that because I have to keep a certain amount of jars in my pot to be sure that there is always 2 inches of water on the top. So some of them are going to process for a little bit longer. Some of them are going to process for 10 minutes, and then I'm going to switch them out with some other jars. But you need to make sure that you always have 2 inches, at least 2 inches of water on top of your jars in your water bath canner. Once your jars are done processing, you are going to remove them with your jar holder, your jar clamp, I'm not sure, what is that thing called? And we're going to move them over here to our towel and let them cool for 24 hours. And then, as always, I made the mistake of not adding enough pectin for this recipe because there's not an exact elderberry jelly recipe. It's all, for me, it's been trial and error. But like I said, after the third time, I should know better by now. I was really hoping that this had enough pectin in it. It did not, so now I am left with elderberry sugar syrup, simple syrup, elderberry simple syrup. So there you go. Here are those 4 jars of beef stew that I canned up, and this is going to be for one of the kids if they get hungry, you know, just a smaller portion. We also have these jars of meat that I canned up, and these are to throw in tacos or stews or soups or whatever. They're just super easy when you have the meat already canned like that. And what a wonderful way to use up what's in your freezer in case the power goes out. And then you have what I call fast food really fast for those hungry moments. We also have the family size. So this feeds my 5 kids with a little bit left over in these quart jars. So I imagine that this would be like possibly feed up to 2 to 3 people, especially if you're feeding kids with that. We also have some more canned water. I canned those to take up space in my pressure cooker, and so that we could have some water that is shelf stable on our shelves. And then I put all of the little ½ pint jars of elderberry away. This is the elderberry that I need to add more pectin to make it jelly, but I don't know if I'm going to do that or not. Right now they're canned as simple syrup, elderberry flavored simple syrup, you know, good enough. And I have a whole nother ½ pint pack that is stuffed away somewhere else because I didn't have room to put it here, and so I just put them all together in their little cardboard box and set them on a shelf out in the garage. So yeah, there you go. That's what I've preserved this week. You can see the ice forming on the tube. These are nice and frozen, and all of the moisture is being pulled from the colostrum and the yogurt melts. This week I was also able to preserve these 3 half-gallon size jars of elderberries. These are fresh freeze-dried elderberries. They look like elderberries that you would just pick right off the bush. I washed them up, put them on the freeze dryer trays, and they freeze dry really well. These do not burst. So if you've used a freeze dryer before, or if you've watched other videos, you would know that the blueberries and any kind of closed off fruit like that has a high juice content will burst. But these elderberries, surprisingly, I mean, there's like that one right there. It's got a little hole in it, so it had a little burst. That's the extent of those. The seeds inside might burst out, but When you use these, you are going to need to strain out the seeds out of whatever juice. You strain out the pulp and the seeds. What I like to do is blitz them really fast with an immersion blender, and that kind of breaks up the pulp part but leaves the seeds still intact for the most part. So I just do it for like a couple of seconds, or I mash them with a potato masher. And then what I'm able to do is make my elderberry syrup or my elderberry jelly, whatever it is. These have to be soaked or put in boiling water or simmering water. Sorry, not boiling, but you want to have these in a simmering water when you extract the juice from them, and they will re-infuse, and then that's when you mash them up with your potato masher or whatever. But I'm happy to have those 3 jars. I may not need to freeze dry any this fall, but you all know I love to pick elderberries here in Southern Oregon, and I have quite a few lucrative spots that I pick from, and then sometimes I sell them. I do make and sell elderberry syrup here locally, the medicinal kind of elderberry syrup, but I haven't started distributing it outside of my hometown. What I have been doing though is from time to time I will offer my subscribers the opportunity to buy elderberry syrup kits or just plain elderberries, and I just bag those up and ship them to you in their pure form out of these jars. So keep your eyes and ears open for the fall time harvest, and I will be selling some fresh freeze-dried elderberries.